Looper stars Bruce Willis, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Emily Blunt. It was released on Blu-ray December 31st, 2012, and runs 1 hour 59 minutes. The movie begins by explaining in detail what a looper is and what they do. It has to get that out of the way, because that's one of the few things this movie can explain. Essentially, a looper is someone hired by a future mafia to execute people being sent back from the future. Since those victims are killed in their past, there's no trace of a crime happening in the future they were sent from. Once a looper's contract expires, their future self, carrying a payment of gold for their services, is sent back to be executed, which is called closing a loop. The present looper has 30 years to live before he's sent back in time again to be executed. Now this is where the confusion started for me. Calling it a closed loop. How does the loop close when the older looper keeps getting sent back to be killed by their younger self? How can you close a loop that's never ending? I eventually had to guess that each time it happens is considered a closed loop, though it keeps happening after that. Eventually, the main character explains a term called letting your loop run, meaning the person sent back to be executed gets away, which results in both the looper and target being hunted down and terminated. Now this term sounds too obvious and boring to sound significant when Joe narrates it, but is a large part of the movie as Bruce Willis, playing old Joe, gets away from his younger self, a looper played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Another looper lets his old self get away, and there was this cool scene where parts of the old guy's body started disappearing. I was wondering what the heck was happening. Turns out they were cutting up the looper and was affecting his future self in real time until they both eventually died. Anyway, old Joe is trying to kill this child who grows up to become this future mafia tyrant that everybody fears, who orchestrated this whole looper business and is supposedly the son of Emily Blunt's character, who young Joe becomes friends with. So young Joe decides to help protect the kid from his older self, trying to prevent an event that fills this kid with hate and turns him into this tyrant. I always felt there was something off about this movie, but just couldn't place it. Then I figured it out. I've had this movie for 8 years, and just a few days ago noticed that. If you don't know by now, Rian Johnson is one of who turned Star Wars into an embarrassment. No, scratch that. That would be giving them too much credit, implying what they made was actually Star Wars. They didn't turn Star Wars into an embarrassment. They embarrassed Star Wars. Is this going to affect my review of Looper? Yeah. While the story is very interesting, it tends to raise more questions than answers. With different timelines and events, not everything makes sense or can be explained. There's a lot of speculation and deciphering and theorizing, but not in a good way. It's entertaining confusion and seems like a case of something being deliberately complicated, masquerading as intelligent. There was an interview with the director where someone asked him about a timeline scenario in the film that couldn't have happened and doesn't make sense. He answered, "There is no real answer. For me, it's a trope of time travel movies, and there's a slight amount of magic logic that you have to apply in order for a story to make sense." I guess you would have to if you write stories that don't make sense. He even takes a line from the movie saying, "If you want to spend all day making diagrams with straws, feel free."
I don't want to talk about time travel shit. Because if we start talking about it, then we're going to be here all day talking about it, making diagrams with straws.
He continues, "That's the Terminator question. If it's important to you to really justify that beyond it makes sense in a story-type way, you'll have to get into multiple timelines existing in never-ending loops of logic." What the hell are you talking about? He continues, "You can shoehorn it into making sense. Meaning, figure it out, because I didn't write a fully structured story. Fix my mistake. Is it just me, or is this a story not well thought out? Seems Johnson just does what he wants, and to hell with whoever watches it. Coming back to this after seeing what happened with Star Wars, It seems plausible. It makes me think the director is a freaking hack. I was getting confused, frustrated, and angry knowing who wrote and directed it. Didn't know it first time I watched it, and just dismissed it. But now the nonsense is starting to make sense. If he's writing things he expects the viewer to fix, what does that say about his talents? Maybe write something less convoluted so everything can be followed and put together with no loose strings. They used makeup to make Joseph Gordon-Levitt look like a younger Bruce Willis, which looks just okay, nothing to go mad over. The director was influenced by anime, and you can see it in the montage where young Joe moves to Asia to live out his last 30 years. While it's cool, the sequence feels out of place with the rest of the film. This movie somehow feels out of place with itself. There are really interesting ideas in story, camera work, special effects, and good directing. I have to admit, the directing is good. Rian Johnson has a lot of style, but a lot of the writing is bland and downright bad at times. And speaking of sound effects, where have I heard this before? Overall, as turn-your-brain-off entertainment, it's a good film. Going deep into the story, trying to figure it out, may just make you frustrated. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. In the futuristic action thriller Looper, time travel will be invented, but it will be illegal and only available on the black market. When the mob wants to get rid of someone, they will send their target 30 years into the past, where a looper, a hired gun like Joe, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, is waiting to mop up. Joe is getting rich, and life is good until the day the mob decides to close the loop, sending back Joe's future self, Bruce Willis, for assassination. Special features. Feature commentary with Rian Johnson, Emily Blunt, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Deleted scenes with optional commentary. There are 22 deleted scenes here. I'm not going to list all of them, but they're extra filler, non-plot essential. A couple of reworked scenes, but nothing that changes the story. Looper, from the beginning. The cast and director talking about each other, kissing each other's asses, basically, and a small segment on the special effects. Really cool to see most of it was done practically. Scoring Looper. Info from the composer about how field recordings from different objects became the base for the film's score. It's pretty cool. The musicians did an amazing job. Looper animated trailer. A really cool paint and sketch version of the trailer. And the science of time travel. Talking with a physics expert and writer about the possibilities surrounding time travel. And additional deleted scenes with optional commentary.